Hi there, my name's Suze Cooper and I'm going to be speaking about social audio, the next thing. First of all, who am I? I'm the former news editor of a commercial radio station here in Kent in the UK called KMFM. I've also read the news for the London Evening Standard as part of their news pilot for the Google Assistant News project. And I'm voice and audio creative at Vixen Labs, where we make skills and actions for big brands for smart speakers, the Alexa, the Google Assistant. I also run Big Tent Media, which is my own company, which helps businesses create audio content. So social audio has certainly made an impact on 2021. In case you're not aware, social audio is the latest social networking offering based on real-time conversations. People can drop in to listen to other people talking and can request to speak if they have something to say on the matter. The two main players at the moment are Clubhouse and Twitter, with Twitter Spaces, but Reddit, Spotify, Facebook and Instagram are just some of the platforms we are expecting to see movement from in this area any day. And here's why. Clubhouse arrived in April 2020 and instantly made a noise, with 2 million iPhone users downloading and taking a listen to what was on offer on the app. Initially, it was only available for iOS users, which is why I can be sure they were all iPhone users. All eyes have been on those stats ever since. And of course, everyone's been watching and questioning the year-on-year mega drop. But I hope that by the end of this short presentation, you'll understand why I think we need to look beyond the graphs and stats and think a little bit more about what is actually being revealed to us here. So let's talk a little bit about that drop, because that's all anyone really wants to talk about at the moment. The fact is that this is a product that brought out this was a product that was brought out in an extraordinary moment in time. It's a time when the world's been shut inside. We've been unable to spend time in the company of others. And to be quite honest, I'm sure we're all thoroughly sick of using screens to communicate. So the pandemic means that lots of people have found they've suddenly had lots of time on their hands, a lot of time to sit and scroll, and a lot of time to explore something that's creating a buzz. More time than they might have had the daily commute and a 9-to-5 office-based job being part of their day. Clubhouse certainly has benefited from its time of launch. The drop should be considered in light of those times. How many people who would never have considered giving Clubhouse any time actually downloaded and spent time over there? I suggest we consider these 2 million users through that lens. More recently, Clubhouse has been rolled out to Android users worldwide, which will probably help increase those numbers, but times have changed again and the landscape has too now. So perhaps they won't skyrocket quite as high as they did before. Now in that landscape, we find Twitter Spaces, launched by the microblogging platform Twitter in November 2020. Now, trying to find user stats for Twitter Spaces isn't quite as straightforward as Clubhouse, so how many people are using it is anyone's guess, really. The closest we can get is to understand that Twitter has around 187 million daily users, and this month it's been moved from a small beta to a larger group that now have access to Twitter Spaces. Now, anyone with 600 followers or more can spin up a Twitter Space and host a conversation live on the platform. So we've just covered the fact that both of these platforms have really been built on a foundation of exclusivity. And I find that quite surprising. This is exclusivity at a time when the world's been experiencing COVID-19 together, a time when Black Lives Matter and other protests have been evidence of a need to be heard. Invite only was a risky way to go for Clubhouse. It immediately causes a divide and then a lengthy build process and a rollout for those using Android. That's damage that might be difficult, if not impossible, to undo. All the while, other platforms are seeing the energy in social audio and racing to get their offering out. More recently, Clubhouse has also come under fire for its blocking function, which means that once a person is blocked by someone, the blocked person can no longer join any room that the blocker is in. Now, while at first this seems like quite a secure offering, it can also be misused to stop people joining and having the chance to speak in a room. I guess there'll always be people that will abuse the system. Twitter Spaces may have appeared in response to Clubhouse, but I have no doubt it was merely brought forward to compete rather than built from standing as soon as Clubhouse appeared. In both cases, the platforms needed a controlled number of beta testers once their product was out in the wild. On Twitter, beta testers needed to have a level of engaged followers, but not necessarily thousands of followers for fear of crashing Spaces as they were testing. While even now Twitter has Spaces closed to anyone with less than 600 followers, it's not dependent on the smartphone that you own, and so it arguably feels a little more inclusive. So it was September 2018 when voice notes first appeared on Twitter, and some of the same team are now finding themselves working on Spaces. They've certainly been watching the social media and voice landscape and working on this behind the scenes, which is why Spaces has appeared with more broader experience perhaps than Clubhouse. It appears to be a more rounded experience for people. There are emojis for interactions, the ability to have live captions, for example. Twitter seems to have been a very agile build. They're building it in stages and iteratively and very publicly. This is an inclusive build with a real community feel, even if that's not what's really happening behind the scenes. Their roadmap appears to be open to the public, and it seems like it's an extension of the communities that are already built there on Twitter. So initially, Twitter was a microblogging site with 140 characters for your little message. That increased to 280 characters in 2017. Now, aside from that, not much has really changed on Twitter over the years. They did have a go at live streaming video with Periscope, and that, they have actually recently killed that off as Spaces has come into the fold. So perhaps you could argue that they've not got a great history of introducing these features to really engage users. What it does show, though, is that they're really not afraid to give it a go, and they're also not afraid to kill it if it isn't working. So in terms of going back to that idea that Twitter Spaces is being built with a real community feel, they're holding these update spaces quite regularly with the product managers that are actually behind the build. Dan Lee, Maya Patterson, Danny Singh are some names that kind of pop into my head as I'm speaking. They're holding these spaces that anyone can join and listen to. They're also taking questions from people that are in there. And also, as someone who's used Twitter Spaces since it was introduced, I've also seen very much that they're listening to what people are wanting in Twitter Spaces. They're listening to the hosts, they're listening to their beta testers. And within a matter of weeks, we're seeing new features come on board. Things like ticketed spaces, the tip jar, scheduling and setting reminders. Already just last week, you're now able to tweet out prior to your space starting, so you can let people know where your space is going to be held. You've got that URL held for you. Things like co-host permissions are due to come up as well, pausing captions, and that purple halo that's now appearing around the hosts when they're in a space to let people know that things are happening. And Clubhouse has also tried to give that community feel. They do hold a weekly town hall. Their release notes are available on Notion, and you can click through and see their latest updates in that way. But somehow it doesn't feel like they're listening quite so intently as Twitter. The product managers on Twitter, you certainly feel like you could reach out to them. Their DMs are open. They're responding to people in the tweet line, on the timelines there, and you can see that conversations are happening. There doesn't seem to be quite so much of a division between the community that are using the product and those that are actually building the product. So perhaps this gives Clubhouse a bit more of a top-down approach to their build. Again, they're built on this kind of bed of exclusivity in my mind. They've already cut out quite a lot of people by just hanging around on iOS for quite so long. And yes, Android is now coming into the fold, but I'm interested to see how many of those people actually become long-term users. Twitter is a platform that's built to build up communities. And to do that, you do have to listen in every sense of the word. Clubhouse is a platform built for talking, and it perhaps feels like we're being told what's coming next from them rather than having any impact or influence. It's also got quite a celebrity-led attitude over on Clubhouse, whereas perhaps Twitter is happier to give people and the space to hear new voices and the space for new ideas to be heard, whether or not you're a celebrity or you have a massive following or not. So is social audio the next big thing? No, I don't think so. Why does it have to be the next big thing? It's the next thing. And it's been boosted by this extraordinary shared experience, which kept us all shut away from the world, unable to travel and sick of the entertainment provided by scrolling. It's also not the latest thing. Audio was where broadcasting began. Radio was the first way of sending messages to one another across the airwaves, and that seemed pretty magical at the time. Nowadays, we'll just switch on the radio and take it for granted that we can hear somebody chatting away. To be able to actually interact with those people that are hosting those miniature radio stations, that's the new magic now for the 21st century. Does it have to be a money spinner? Everyone's talking about how to monetize this space. Everyone's talking about the tip jar on Twitter. Couldn't it actually just pay us to be more human? Maybe its currency is communication. Its legacy is not savings, but education. It's hearing from some of those voices that may not have actually had the space to shout loud enough on other platforms. It's giving us a better understanding of people from around the world, people who experience the world in a different way to ourselves. And I hope that perhaps it's levelling that playing field a little. And we also have to remember that not every platform has to be right for everyone. But for those for whom audio is a factor, then this is surely a breakthrough. Is it the next big thing? No, it's the next thing. And here's why. Here's all the reasons on each of the platforms why people really are jumping into this and using it. As I've said, Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse are now both available on iOS and Android. Both of them have the ability for people to listen in. Clubhouse still has this invite-only access, which again, I feel is kind of divisory. It's dividing people. Twitter Spaces already had some technology there with Periscope that they've really built on to ensure that their audio quality is really quite crisp and clear, and also more reliable, I find, than Clubhouse. That does have a lower audio quality. The desktop access is in development over on Twitter Spaces. Clubhouse is very much a mobile app, and I've not really heard any murmurings about that changing at all. On Twitter Spaces, you've got that ability to hit the emoji button, and I am most certainly one of those people who, when I now switch over to Clubhouse, finds that I can't let those speakers know that I agree with them or anything like that. I can't applaud what they're saying in any way, and I've actually ended up leaving a space sometimes because I've gone to hit the emoji button, and actually the only button you can really hit is leave quietly or request the mic. So perhaps that's slightly limited. You can have up to 5,000 listeners on Clubhouse, which is really quite a lot. You can have unlimited on Twitter Spaces. There is kind of the idea, you know, there is going to be a critical mass, a point at which actually a more intimate group allows you to have that better conversation. And that's true whether or not you are at a networking meetup or at a conference. This is very much the same. And I've said before, it's a lot about reading the room in the same way that you would do if you were actually there in real life. Discoverability is certainly an issue on both of the platforms. Neither of them have got it cracked. Over on Clubhouse, you have to make sure that you scroll through the hallway, which can be a very long process. Or you can get notifications sent to your phone, although I found that can invite an influx of notifications onto your lock screen, which isn't always helpful. Over on Twitter, they are working on you being able to schedule your Twitter Spaces to let people know where you're going to be and at what time. But at the moment, it's very much reliant on the hosts to tweet out and let people know when they will be speaking. And while you've got the ability to tweet out to your followers, your community, when you spin up a space, you do also have to remember to do that. And as you are the single host in that room at the moment, with the co-host facilities, not functionality not yet being up and running, it can be just another thing to remember, and also can be quite easily forgotten. So neither of them have got it cracked, but it's most certainly a very interesting space to be in and to watch grow. So in 2018, I presented a talk where I challenged those present to imagine what it might sound like if social media could be accessed by a smart speaker. Maybe we would ask to hear our last 5 tweets. Well, I think social audio is a step in that very direction. And I don't think it takes a huge leap of the imagination to think about joining these social audio spaces and rooms via your smart speaker, where all commands are directed by voice. The quote here from the Twitter blog about spaces reminds me of some of the key reasons why we say people are using voice. Voice is loaded with meaning. It provides intent, detail, and emotion in a way that no other form of communication does. Those are the exact same things that social audio offers over other types of non-verbal social media. And being audio, it's hands-free and allows for multitasking. What more could we want in these busy times? If you want to hear more about the social audio landscape, myself and Madeline Sklar are hosting a Twitter space live every Wednesday. And we're also creating that as a podcast. So if you can't join us on Twitter spaces live each week, then do try and catch up wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for listening today. I do hope that you've learned something new about social audio. Please connect with me on Twitter at Big Tent Social, and I'll catch you next time.